It began with a name. Or rather, the absence of one. Daniel Levine stood quietly among rows of white crosses in a military cemetery outside Nettuno, Italy. He was 32, a second-generation Jewish American, and a teacher of history back in Chicago. He had taken a sabbatical to retrace his grandfather's path through Europe during World War II. It was a personal pilgrimage, part grief, part gratitude. His grandfather, Private Samuel Levine, had survived the war. But not all of his fellow Jewish brothers in arms had been so fortunate. As Daniel wandered the solemn grounds, one grave caught his eye. The cross bore no Star of David, just a name, David Katz. Something about it felt off. He searched the records. Katz was Jewish. Yet, like thousands of others who died in Europe, his grave was marked incorrectly, not from malice, but from haste, chaos, or simple oversight in the wake of war. Daniel couldn't let it go. He returned home with something heavier than when he'd left. He began writing letters, first to the Cemetery Commission, then to Jewish war veterans organizations, and finally to anyone who might listen. He dug through dusty archives, scanned handwritten military records, and tracked down descendants with trembling voices who had never even known where their loved ones were buried. The deeper he went, the clearer the truth became. More than 500 Jewish American soldiers had been buried under crosses instead of Stars of David. The injustice haunted him, not just for what was wrong, but for how long it had been that way. 75 years. Then came the breakthrough. A letter arrived from the U.S. Commission of Military Cemeteries. They would review the documentation. There was no guarantee, but they were listening. Months passed. Daniel kept teaching, kept researching, and quietly, painstakingly, built a coalition of families, rabbis, historians, and even former soldiers. He called it the Star Restoration Project. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't famous, but he was relentless. And then, one spring morning, the call came. The commission approved the first 5 corrections. New headstones would be made. Proper ones. The Stars of David would shine in stone where they always should have been. Daniel wept. Word spread. News outlets picked up the story. More families came forward. A retired Marine donated funds to help. A group of Italian students volunteered to clean the graves. And one by one, the crosses were replaced, not erased, but corrected, each one a small resurrection of memory. But the most powerful moment came when Daniel returned to Italy for the first rededication. There, under a soft Tuscan sky, he met Miriam Katz, David Katz's great-niece. She had flown from Tel Aviv, holding a yellowed letter David had written from the front lines in 1944. It ended with the words, "Tell Mama I'm proud. If I fall, let her know I died a Jew and an American." As the new headstone was unveiled, bearing the Star of David and Katz's full name, Miriam knelt down, placed her hand on the cool marble, and whispered, "Now you rest truly as you were." The crowd stood silent. Soldiers saluted. A rabbi sang the mourners' Kaddish. And Daniel, standing beside them, finally felt the weight lift. This wasn't just about stones. It was about dignity. About identity. About making sure no one gets forgotten for who they were. By the end of the year, 27 more headstones had been corrected. Daniel often says he never intended to start a movement. He just saw a missing name and couldn't look away. And in a world that often moves too fast to care, sometimes all it takes is one person slowing down, long enough to notice, long enough to remember. Because the truth is, history is not just what we inherit. It's what we choose to heal. And every time a stone was replaced, it wasn't just about honoring the dead. It was a quiet, powerful promise to the living. That kindness still matters, that truth still has weight, and that even decades later, it's never too late to do the right thing.